Ladies and gentlemen, if you're like me, you must be looking at politicians at this point in time and just thinking, like, they're just disgusting. The things that they say, the things that they do are just revolting, and it is showing weaknesses in the democratic system. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to show you a clip, first of all, around the BBC in the UK, specifically what the BBC has done to Donald Trump. As you will know, if you watch this channel, the BBC was found to have breached its editorial guidelines and doctored videos around Trump, specifically around the supposed overthrow of the government following his election defeat from, the most safe and secure election of all time, in which the most popular president of all time won, Joe Biden. Now, the BBC was actually found guilty of that offense. In fact, it actually led to the Director General having to quit his job. Now, in retaliation, Donald Trump said, and he had been mulling this for a while, whether or not he would sue the BBC for propaganda, effectively trying to attack a sitting president and delegitimize him. Well, the Liberal Democrats have now issued a counter-argument to this, and you can see that right here.
Trump is coming after our BBC. He's suing it for $10 billion, but really he's trying to destroy it. But instead of standing up for Britain, the Conservative Party is helping him do it, alongside Reform. His lawsuit uses the words of Liz Truss and Kemi Badenoch, both so desperate to attack the BBC and fawn over Trump that they're helping him destroy one of our greatest national treasures. You can't let Trump get away with this. The BBC mustn't pay him a penny of your money. Instead, it should fight back. Trump stood in the Oval Office and lied about the BBC on global television.
Yeah, I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth, literally. They put words in my mouth. They had me saying things that I never said coming out. I guess they used AI or something.
So I say this. Let's take Trump on. The BBC should sue him right back for $10 billion. We've had enough of his lies. We've had enough of Trump attacking our country. It's time to stand up for Britain. It's time to tell Trump, enough is enough.
Now, I must say that this entire clip really got my blood boiling because they are yet again trying to deny the obvious. The BBC is not under attack. The BBC is a propaganda piece pushing far-left activism. They have been found guilty of that time and time again. Do not forget, they pushed pro-Palestinian propaganda. They pushed pro-Gazan propaganda. They've been found guilty of doing that repeatedly, of pushing forward Hamas lies. And yet, the political establishment still wants to vilify Donald Trump. And all of this becomes pertinent because at the weekend, we saw the attack at Bondi Beach. Bondi Beach was not a conflict zone. It was not occupied territory, but it still ended in mass murder. Now, the attack itself was not an act of random violence, but it was ideologically motivated. It was carried out by a father and a son who believed that they were morally justified. Now, why did they feel morally justified? Well, because the liberal establishment, the far-left activists, have said that this type of resistance was justified, it was socially good, and ergo for was socially good, reverting to violence, well, is justified.
Why is it so safe? Because extremists are not allowed to wave the Al-Qaeda flag in the UAE. You can't do that in Saudi Arabia. You can't open up a Facebook page in Saudi Arabia and support the Muslim Brotherhood. That's not going to happen. And you can call it democracy and free speech, and people have the right to express their views with all due respect. If your view is to behead me, then I will make sure you do not exist in the same society that I exist in. It's as simple as that. This is Muslim logic. This is the logic of the rulers in the Middle East.
Muslim countries are better, most of them are better at this than anyone, yet Western countries feel like they know better.
Now, ultimately, what we are seeing here is an undeclared war that has migrated into civilian Western life. Now, the war doesn't rely on army. It spreads through Islamist ideology, online radicalization, activist intimidation, and state weakness and hesitation. Jews obviously are the first target, but they're not the only ones. In London, mobs protest Jewish-owned businesses while police stand aside. News out is that a bakery in Sydney that has been targeted for 2 years is now closing because of its perceived Jewish links. Now, political leaders respond with candle lighting, symbolic gestures, empty language about the light over the darkness. All this while synagogues are barricaded, schools need security, and hate marches are tolerated.
That we as Muslims, we are a peace-loving people, but we are permitted to engage in jihad when necessary. We must remember this.
Meaning of the word jihad can mean absolutely anything. Nonsense. They are not calling for an interpersonal struggle with the nature of the divine. They are calling for violence. And anyone who can't recognize that should be questioned about their own motive.
Effectively, the state now manages the risk from extremist ideology by enforcing law. Jews conclude that governments just won't protect them, and immigration is no longer taboo, it's now rational from Western states. But the forces involved are clear for all to see: Islamic theology, far-left ideological cover, and anarchists and hostile foreign actors. This alliance isn't just anti-Jewish, it's anti-Western civilization. As they say, in their own charters, first they come for the Saturday people, then they come for the Sunday people, and the Western countries respond in accordance. Australia's latest harebrained idea is that they will enforce this, they will fix the anti-Semitism experienced by the importation of extremists from the Third World by gun laws. Yes, gun laws will prevail. Yeah, this is dumb, but this again is the reason why Western societies led by far-left extremists are destroying the West. Now, for those of you who don't know, yesterday was Reconciliation Day, and in KZN, Ramaphosa gave an address in which he explicitly rejected the white genocide claims. Instead, his speech said that we should look for unity, social cohesion, and evidence that race relations are improving. Now, he highlights the following points. He says that we can see mixed communities now living together, children of different races learning and playing together, and cooperation between black and white farmers, plus successful land reform cases. Now, he claimed that attendance by some Afrikaner cultural representatives to his chat was proof that reconciliation was working. But what he didn't specifically talk about is farm attacks as a security issue, the collapse in rural policing, the immigration trends, where a number of white families have sought safer pastures abroad, nor property abandonment and private security dependence. Instead, he attempted to discredit AfriForum and Solidarity internationally, especially in the US, because of the suggested claims and the suggestion that somehow those claims have led to the Afrikaner US refugee program. Now, many opposition parties had a reaction to Ramaphosa's speech. The first is the DA said that reconciliation requires honesty about the past. The EFF said that reconciliation without accountability is enforced amnesia. And the MK party rejected Reconciliation Day entirely as meaningless. So yes, you can see how social cohesion is doing great. So government treats the issue as a PR problem, not as safety or governance failure. Now that speech in itself was important because yesterday something really bizarre happened. The news came out that South African authorities raided a US refugee processing facility in Johannesburg. Now, just to be clear, if they did do this, it's almost an act of war. Like, you can't actually do that. It's highly, highly controversial. US officials were reportedly detained briefly and questioned during the operation. Now, the US State Department has issued a response, and they called the incident unacceptable and demanded clarification, signaling potential diplomatic fallout. I mean, that's more diplomatic fallout than we already have. Now, this facility is not a US embassy, but is still staffed by US refugee officers. As you know, Donald Trump's administration prioritized Afrikaner refugee claims, and they've done so in the public. Now, the South African government strongly denies the persecution narrative. In fact, you could see Ramaphosa addressing that and attempting to counter it at his Reconciliation Day address. As far as we can tell, the raid appears to be less about immigration enforcement and more about South Africa asserting its sovereignty and sending a political message to Washington. But the risk here is that South Africa looks openly hostile to humanitarian processing and it confirms international fears about institutional instability in South Africa. And I must stress, if this turns out to be true, the fallout will be huge. The backfiring diplomatically will be massive. Now, apparently, one of the reasons given for the so-called raid was that apparently there were 7 Kenyan nationals, all who had been given deportation orders. Now, they were accused of working illegally whilst on tourist visas and apparently were being paid to assist with the refugee screening. And so the government is suggesting that one of the reasons they may have raided this place was to find these Kenyans who were working illegally. Now, the government's position is that this was just routine immigration enforcement, no US officials were arrested, and there was no interference with the US refugee program. But in reality, this is starting to look like a form of retrospective justification for the raid after diplomatic backlash. Now, all of this was important because according to the South African state, these volunteers, these Kenyans, had all been denied visas, and authorities are claiming that they were effectively employees. They weren't actually volunteers. So you could ask the question as to what was really going on here. Was the raid specifically to interrupt the actual refugee program because the South African government considers it to be controversial? Or was this nothing more than border control? Do let me know what you think in the comments section below. But one thing that we do know is that if the Trump administration takes this as being nothing more than provocation, sanctions will follow. The Trump administration is already moving to issue sanctions against ANC individuals. This will cement it. Now, moving on to a final news article, specifically as we've mentioned KZN, the KZN Premier yesterday survived a motion of no confidence, which had been brought by the MK party. Now, right after this, the legislature descended into shouting, physical chaos, and procedural confusion. And you can watch that right here. Now, the MK party and the EFF demanded a secret ballot, but the vote was held openly. Now, the MK party disputes the legitimacy and is threatening court action. I mean, it's kind of their mode and detra, the MK party, that is. But in any case, the Premier is accusing the MK party of being nothing more than opportunistic. Now, what we're seeing here is the fragility of provincial balance in that province. And what we're expecting to see is more destabilization ahead of the 2026 local elections. But this is all important because if you watch my videos a few days ago, Ramaphosa addressed the ANC Youth League, and one of the things that they decried was the unruliness in which that whole address occurred, with many individuals in the Youth League shouting and causing physical chaos, singing, dancing, and disrupting the president. And what I must say at this point in time is this is the way politics are now conducted in South Africa, thanks to the ANC. The ANC put this as the norm. They put it out as the example for everyone to follow. And now they're shocked that everybody's doing exactly what they've always done. In any case, that's the news of today. Do let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. And until next time, bye.